What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pit Limiter Podcast. It is episode number 14. I'm your host, Zach Buchanan. Joining me as always, it's JP3, John Poole. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not too much, Zach. What's going on?
Well, I had a kart race this weekend. It didn't rain, surprisingly. We were supposed to get rained out, and I got second to a sprint car driver, so it wasn't a bad weekend. Yeah.
Nice, not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah, it was a photo finish, so it's a little tough to swallow, but we had an insane weekend of motorsports, not going to lie. I think insane is an understatement, and let's get it all started off with Stop and Go.
So, first bit of news in Stop and Go, Formula 2 driver and Williams reserve driver Nicholas Latifi could replace Kubica. As it's well documented, Robert Kubica has been struggling with his return to F1 after an 8-year hiatus, and the team could be looking to replace the pole with the Canadian star.
So it was announced that the Mexican Grand Prix has been dropped from the F1 calendar for 2020, and there's a little bit of a rumor, some rumblings that Liberty is currently looking to return to Africa for the near future.
Some driver news. Sheldon Creed, ARCA Series champion last year, will be driving the number 8 Accessories Driver Edge Development Camaro for JRM in the Xfinity Series at Daytona.
So the NASCAR Gander Outdoor Truck Series was at the Charlotte Motor Speedway on Friday night. And to nobody's surprise, Kyle Busch took home the victory. It was his 5th victory of the season, his 5th of 5 starts. And, well, thankfully for the rest of the Truck Series field, Kyle will not be in the series for the rest of the season.
So we have some IndyCar news. Elton Julian, team principal at Dragon Speed, has announced that next month's 24-hour Le Mans will be the last time the team enters the LMP1 category, as they set to extend their presence in the NTT Data IndyCar Series next year.
That's going to be an interesting story to track. Unfortunately, it was announced via Instagram, actually via his own Instagram. Zachary Clayman DeMello of Canada, unfortunately, will not be able to compete in the rest of the Indy Lights schedule. Remember, he won at St. Petersburg to start off the Indy Lights season this year. Unfortunately, will not be competing in the Freedom 100 among other races just due to lack of funding.
Saturday night NASCAR Cup Series technically had an off week. They had their non-points all-star race this weekend. We saw some incredible racing. Photo finishes from Bubba Wallace, Almirola, Daniel Suarez, William Byron. But in the end, Kyle Larson wins the Open and transfers on to the All-Star and takes home the $1 million prize.
And to round out Stop and Go, Indy 500 qualifying, which if you haven't heard anything about that, man, you've been missing out, because I kind of broke down and bought the NBC Gold subscription, and it paid off definitely. Simon Pagenaud is the pole sitter for the 2019 Indianapolis 500, which is set to take place this Sunday. Some more notables from that. In the last row shootout on Sunday, the 3 drivers that were bumped from the field: Patricio Award of Carlin Racing, Max Chilton of Carlin Racing, and Fernando Alonso, the 2-time world champion of McLaren Racing. That rounds out Stop and Go. We don't have a Tuesday trivia for you this week, but let's jump into the discussion. So the All-Star race, John, they did change up a little bit in terms of the package, and I think the cooler conditions, on top of the minor changes that they made to that package, it paid off because it was a damn good race.
Well, I will say this. From an entertainment standpoint, yes, that is what we need to see. Drivers were willing to put their cars on the line in order to, go for it all. And that is what, has been sorely lacking, I would say, in the past few seasons, but definitely this season with the cars. Now, I will say that after about 5 laps, this package is somehow worse than what we have now, with just the dirty air and drag. But from the format that we had last Saturday, it was perfect for that format. But I still think there are some things left to be desired with the
Definitely,
package that we saw.
definitely. And I think it's worth pointing out. You could look back at Kansas. You could look back at any intermediate this season. It has gotten spread out after a couple laps, and I think there's a false narrative that some fans have taken from this aero package with there being more downforce and less power. They think that there's going to be this crazy gridlocked pack racing all throughout a run, and what they forget is there is some tire degradation on top of dirty air, and when you're constantly running in dirty air, that's just going to increase your tire degradation because you're constantly, just trying to claw your way through traffic. So the false narrative around that is a little irritating, but from what I've seen from this package so far this season, I would say it's a good band-aid for what's to come, because obviously that new car, the Gen 7 that we're going to have in, what is it, 2021, I believe?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so people seem to forget that we've got a new car coming and like to complain about everything. It's a band-aid for now. It's just like the aero kits with IndyCar. It's a band-aid for what's to come. It's like the windscreen with IndyCar as well. People always complaining, we need to protect these drivers, need to protect their heads. We need something for that. Well, they're working on an aero screen, and that's to come. And to band-aid that, they have, what is it? Was the AFP or whatever it is?
Advanced frontal protection, yes.
Yes, we have that as a band-aid for now. Okay, these band-aids are to get us through the tougher times as we look forward to what's to come. I think that's what's constantly forgotten in NASCAR. I would say NASCAR's got a good little string of success going. They've got a little bit of momentum because I've been pretty impressed with them the last month or so.
Well, I will say that I don't like the direction of the package personally. You look at racing series around the world. IndyCar for the longest of time, we could say that they went for downforce and they went for that pack racing. And what did that result in? It resulted
Fatalities, injuries, big crashes.
Big crashes, fatalities, and just it wasn't really much of a challenge, I would say. Now, granted, it is still a challenge. I won't say that, but it's not as much of a challenge.
More of a mental game, I would say.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess.
Yeah, I mean, more of a mental game. I mean, you think about the old IRL package, we nearly killed Kenny Brack. We killed Dan Weldon.
Paul Dana.
Tony
Renna.
Tony Renna.
That wasn't in a race, but I mean that's a completely different story.
But still, the design of the car was built for that. With that, I mean, Sam Hornish just was going along. Mario, I forgot about Mario.
Gosh, man, he got super lucky in that crash.
Yeah, and just like I said, now I'm not saying that NASCAR, they're not flying per se, but I don't like the.
They have a different aero issue in regards to flying.
Yeah.
And we discussed that last week, and I don't want to get into it because I'm going to get super heated about it again.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I didn't like it, but I will say this: some of the ideas that they had going on, perfect. I think that the splitter should be one piece. It should be smaller, but it should be a one-piece carbon fiber. You can't manipulate it.
Yeah.
2, I like the hood ducts. Surprisingly, even though it added a little bit of front downforce, which I'm not too keen for, it looked cool. I mean,
yeah.
I'll say that. It looked cool. It reminded me of, muscle cars, or somebody who soups up a muscle car, per se. And I think that's the type of aggressive styling that's been missing in NASCAR, I would say, since, the early 80s, I would say, at least aggressive-wise.
Yeah, I mean, if we're taking, if you look at it from that aspect, if we're taking, and you do have the Camaro and the Mustang in the Cup Series right now. I mean, if we're taking NASCAR from a sedan family car-esque series, and trying to appeal to the consumer, and make it these things look like these evil, aggressive muscle cars. To me, that just seems cool, man. Like, I think that's like every kid's dream. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a race fan, or if you're a car fan growing up, you probably collected the Hot Wheels and the muscle cars, and that's just cool to see.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more or less, of a branding per se. You're trying to brand the sport. NASCAR's always been about rough and tough and such like that, but the cars just for quite a long time didn't have that appearance. And nowadays, you get the whole, oh, you hit the wall, now it's completely done because, oh, you bent the right rear, so now there's no aerodynamics to it.
Yeah.
I just,
And then you go to pit road and you can't use you have to use bare bond, and you have a crash clock.
yeah, which I, don't get me started about that rule. We'll leave that for another day. That's a
Yeah.
terrible, terrible,
We could open up
terrible.
a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, but that's all I have about the Indy pack or the Indy package.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good segue, I guess, to our next topic, which is IndyCar qualifying. But that's basically all I have about the All Star package. And it was great for the short run. It was great in terms of excitement. I mean, we had, I hate saying this, what Boyer said, we had 5 accidents within a 150 lap range. And on top of that, we had a crash after the checkered flag and Boyer throwing haymakers at
That was
every,
exciting.
everybody's favorite thumb, Ryan Newman.
Yeah. I will say one last thing about the All Star package, or this year's package, or the approach that NASCAR is taking to it. Personally, just being, I guess you could say that racing purist uh, that I am, or somewhat am, seeing these cars with an extreme amount of downforce and no horsepower, to me, like, just that initial impression, it's like, man, why do we gotta do this? The authenticity isn't there, but the quality, the entertainment factor is there. And I think they've gone in the right direction if they're looking for that, while they band-aid uh, the series as they get into that new car. If they can figure it out, man, I think they've hit something
Well, it's
in
like
in this time period, at least.
I will say, the one thing that I've been saying now since they went to this new package, I think I've mentioned it in a previous podcast before, but you got to go to track specific, packages.
Yes,
Similar to
100%
what
agree.
similar to what IndyCar does. I mean, IndyCar doesn't go to Iowa with the Indianapolis package.
No,
It just doesn't work. So you
cool.
have to go, and one could argue, well, they're technically doing that now with the 725 to 550 horsepower, and then the Aeroducts versus no Aeroducts. But it's just
I
neither
think
here nor there.
I think you could really argue that the aero makes a bigger difference than the horsepower,
Yeah, I'd say
because
that.
these things are so sealed to the ground. I mean, adding more downforce is just like, and then on top of that, you have no power. You know what I mean? You'd probably need close to 1,000 horsepower to come close to what you'd need to be able to pass if we're looking at a normal package. You know what I mean? So that that's kind of that just kind of makes you want to throw your hands up a little bit. But
Yeah. I mean, some of these tracks where it's almost wide open or almost completely wide open, they should have the full power to their. They should have take the damn tapered spacer off, give them the whole 900 horsepower. Places at like Dover or Bristol,
yeah,
Martinsville,
where you need it.
where you need it.
I will say, as we get ready to transition here into Indy 500 qualifying, remember CART back in the 90s and early 2000s? They basically had a specific aero package for almost every kind of track. So the super speedways, you had the Wicker, or the Hanford device, which
Yeah.
was a gigantic Wicker on the rear wing, which looked really cool. It created some insane racing. Then you had the regular standard street road course aero configuration. Obviously different for each car, but
Mm-hmm.
the expected wing configuration for that. For speedways, say like for I believe like Lausitz, Germany, and other speedways, like they even ran this configuration at places like I believe Nazareth. They went with a speedway wing a couple
Did they
times.
go
Just
with that with Rockingham in
yes,
the
the
UK?
UK, yeah, which was a square shaped track, I believe. They ran a standard, I guess you could call it speedway configuration. And then for the short ovals, they would run a mixture. They would run like the say a speedway front wing, and then they'd have a modified rear wing where it looks like a road course. Uh, it looks like a road course rear wing, but it was more of a wicker, almost kind of what the Hanford device did on the super speedways. It was very odd looking, but it looked. I mean, the racing was good nevertheless, and like you said, they had a specific package for every kind of track.
Yeah, and I think if we were to move to say that with say NASCAR, we could. I would like to see something similar in design, at least rear spoiler wise, similar to what we had COT whenever they went to the spoiler. I think that way it's being mandated by NASCAR. You have to bolt it. NASCAR has to bolt it on,
Mhm.
such like that. So there's no manipulation or this or
Yeah.
that. That's that's my that's what I
Right.
think. But
I couldn't agree with you more. Anything that NASCAR can do to put these teams in a box, especially aerodynamically, it's going to improve the racing. But yeah, we've talked about that one enough, I think. Let's dive right into the big one. There's a lot to talk about here. Uh, Reasonably so. Indianapolis 500 qualifying. They started practice early last week, which led all the way to the weekend. And there was a lot of storylines, and I don't even know where to begin. I would say easily, uncontested, the biggest story, like the biggest story of the month. And this might be a little controversial to some people. I think the biggest story of the month, uh, to me, the biggest accomplishment of the month is Juncos Racing losing their sponsor. Like what was it, a week before the 500 or qualifying?
Tuesday, last Tuesday I believe it was.
Yeah, Tuesday before qualifying. So basically a week ago, they lose their sponsor. They still, regardless, show speed throughout practice that week. They crash on Friday, and from Friday to Saturday morning, they roll in their road course prepared car from Coda and transition that to be a speedway car. Obviously, doesn't have all the aerodynamic components underneath that their original speedway car did, but they pieced something together. They had no spare parts. Teams all around the paddock helped them piece together something for Kyle Kaiser to go out there, excuse me, and attempt to make a run on Saturday. They weren't fast enough on Saturday and somehow found the speed on Sunday after it rained and everything. Nobody had any practice on Sunday
Well, no,
before going out there.
there was some practice, but Kaiser and Juncos decided to just massage the body. They didn't even go out for practice.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they didn't have practice. I'm sorry. They didn't have practice, but everybody else went out for practice. But yeah, so basically you're going out on a completely green track, and he went last of all things. Last. Probably the most pressure on anybody there. Uh Man, that was impressive, I would say. Obviously McLaren missing the field is a big story. There's a lot of things going on there. Whether it's the technical partnership that they had with Carlin Racing, with Carlin having 3 cars in their own stable already and not being up to speed. It kind of says a lot that Charlie Kimball was the fastest and was the only car from their team to make the field, and he's only running, I believe, 5 races this year.
He's running. Well, he was running, I believe, like 5 or 6 races, yeah, to start the year because he didn't have the sponsorship dollars.
Exactly. So yeah, the guy that's running the almost the least amount of races on the team. I guess if you count Alonso, he's not. But of Carlin's 3 cars, he's running the least amount of races out of anybody on the team. And not to take anything away from him, he's finished, I believe, 3rd in the 500 before, 3rd or 4th. Fourth, yeah. So I mean, he's not a rookie. It's not his first rodeo at the 500 or qualifying. He can get the job done, but for it's crazy, and it's not just the speed aspect either. I mean, O'Ward crashed, so they were behind the eight ball there. But there were two different occasions where they pulled a car and withdrew their time to go back out there and run, and they ran slower. It was a Jay Howard 2010 moment where they went out there and they ran slower and suffered from it.
Exactly.
They did it with O'Ward and they did it with Chilton, and
Yeah.
it's huge for Chilton because that's a double points race, and he's a full-time competitor. That is huge. It's just like Hinchcliffe missing it last year.
But I'd say it's not as big considering, Hinch is I don't like to dig on Max while he's down, but he's never really in contention. I mean, Hinchcliffe we expect, to be up front contending for wins, but Chilton, not so much.
I won't take anything away from him in terms of Indy, though, because he led the most laps. He led, I believe, 53 laps in 2017, nearly won the thing. He finished third.
Yes, but that was with Chip Ganassi, though,
Right.
not Carlin.
Right, exactly. So, obviously, the car was not up to speed. The driver was there, definitely. And you could say the same for Patricio O'Ward, because Patricio O'Ward is a whale of an upcoming driver. And, they just weren't up to speed as a team.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not sure if you've read it or not, but today, at least when we're recording this, AP and Jenna Fryer has
I saw that. Yeah.
has came out with an article stating all of the failures that McLaren had. It's ludicrous to think that it was this bad behind the scenes, this bad. But I'm surprised they were even as close as what they were, considering. Yeah. But I'll make this statement. I will say that Carlin's blunder this year has to be the worst team performance ever at the Speedway. Worst.
Wow.
I would say even worse than
Penske
missing it in '95.
Yeah, and people like to point out Penske missing it in '95, but you also got to remember you had the whole politicking going on within USAC, because remember they had the pushrod Mercedes engine, and they reduced the boost for that motor specifically for that year, and basically reduced it so much that they were not competitive. People like to point out that it was the Penske chassis, and the Penske chassis was failing, but it wasn't until later in the 90s where the Penske chassis really seemed to be a big problem. But yeah, that year specifically, I think it was more of a USAC shafting Penske than them doing it to themselves.
Yeah, and just, Carlin, I get where they were coming. They're a small team. They just started last year. So I get where they're coming from. They're very successful in the lower ladder series. I will not take that away from them. But they just took on way too much for this month.
Definitely.
They took on a third car with Patricio. They took on this technical alliance with McLaren. I mean, I'm reading here that they didn't even paint the car the right shade of orange.
Right.
Which a lot of people are saying, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because
if you were told, if
sponsors have a big say on what that is, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not entirely sure, but McLaren has a copyright on that color specifically, so they want to run that color. So, but yeah, you have this, you have we heard this, kind of in the background. We didn't really report on it, but a data guy had gotten fired from McLaren.
I think he left. I thought he resigned.
I think he got fired because there's somebody that got taken off the team here because of an electrical issue. Got fired. So there was a data guy. Pretty sure he got himself fired. I mean, just simple mistakes.
Yeah.
Converting from the metric system to the US system caused issues. It was just, what were they thinking?
Yeah, and it's crazy when you think of it, because this is a motorsport giant, as Lee Diffie said on Sunday. A motorsport giant I mean, like they've competed at Indianapolis before. They're F1 world champions. They have a long history of motorsports in multiple categories, not just F1, not just the Indianapolis 500. Like this is a global giant, and yeah, like I'm gonna be honest, they really screwed themselves when they decided to take shots at Honda when they were with them in Formula One. Yeah, the Honda motors weren't necessarily great, but you ruined any chance of being partnered with Andretti this month. And if they were partnered with Andretti, you don't have that problem. Not at all.
Oh no, that's completely
Because
completely accurate. And I'll say this: I'm actually going to blame not necessarily their jibe at Honda per se. I'm going to blame the shareholders of McLaren because when it all comes said and done to it, they were the ones that are like, we need you to focus on F1. Don't worry about this. And, the whole Harding
oh, that was so bad.
Fiasco from
Yeah.
last year. It wasn't Zach Brown's fault. I will say that Zach Brown actually wanted to make this work 100%, but he's only a CEO of the company. He has to answer to his shareholders.
Right.
His shareholders said, fix the F1 team. Which, if you look this year without having Alonso and such like that, they seem to be on the right track as of now. But, we'll wait and see how the season progresses for McLaren.
Now hold up. Let's backtrack to this Harding story from last year, because this is funny in itself, and it kind of says a lot about Harding Racing and how bad their situation was until they got the financial backing from George Steinbrenner IV. I'm trying to remember the whole story behind it as it was told to me. I believe there was a shop for sale. I believe it was on 16th Street.
I believe so.
In Speedway. And
McLaren helped them buy it, I believe.
Yeah, and basically they were, at that point, almost a shoo-in to become a partner with Harding or even buy out Harding. And then Harding had, I believe, what kind of broke that negotiation off was because, well, there's a couple things, I believe. McLaren dropped the ball, and then Harding had his divorce case because he cheated on his wife.
Lovely.
Yeah, great. Love to hear that kind of stuff in the motorsports world. So yeah, that's another Harding Racing, Harding Steinbrenner Racing. That's a whole different story, and it was one thing that we didn't talk about on Stop and Go, and I hate that it segues into this, but we found out that Al Unser Jr. was arrested on account of OWI. He was driving while intoxicated, so you hate to see that from a champion like that.
But
just
what is
because
this, like the fourth or fifth time? The guy needs help.
Yeah, it's really sad. Because we look at it at this point, there were people that grew up looking up to him. He was people's heroes, you know what I mean? And like my dad's met him at his work 2 different times in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
The nicest guy. I mean, go out of his way to talk to anybody. But they're just like normal people. They go through tough times just like anybody else does. And sometimes you need a little bit of extra help. And if you can't get that extra help, then you're going to suffer from it. And unfortunately, that's what it's come to. And I hate it for him because him and his family have already gone through a lot with that. So it's really unfortunate to see.
Yeah, you're right.
Some other big stories, though, from this month that we kind of whiffed on. It's worth pointing out, Pippa Mann driving for a USAC team that has never raced at the Speedway in an IndyCar, let alone an IndyCar alone. Like, this was their first outing as an IndyCar team. Made the field. They qualified 30th. And Ben Hanley, Dragon Speed. This would have been, I believe, their 3rd race.
I believe so.
Yes. And their first time at the Speedway, their first time on an oval. Ben Hanley's first time on an oval. They qualify 27th. Impressive. Because I'll be honest, when we were talking about, all right, who's the 3 guys going home? I said Hanley, Pippa Mann, and Kyle Kaiser.
I believe I said Chilton. So I got one of them right,
You
but I
you
would.
did, and I was like, why are you saying Chilton, man? Like, I was like, there's no way he's missing the field, and I was like, what? Yeah, I dropped the ball on that one for sure.
But yeah, I didn't see. I also said Hanley, and I said Pippa Man.
Yeah,
And I'm not trying to take away from Hanley's efforts. He's a great sports car driver, but just doesn't have the oval experience. And Pippa Man's Pippa Man. That's all I got to say about that.
well, let's give credit where it's due. She's never really driven for a great team at the Speedway. I think the car that she ran last year in the 500 was a road course chassis from 2017, maybe,
Yeah,
if I
believe so.
remember correctly.
Believe so. I'm not entirely
So
for certain on that.
that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, she's not a championship caliber driver or a race winning caliber driver by any means, but she's got the money to be there. It's another entry in the field, and they got the job done. It's hard to take that away from them, and it's really impressive being their first year at Indy. So it's a feel good story. It's cool to see for them, especially to see for Dragon Speed as well, because now they've pretty much committed that they're going to be around IndyCar racing for a while. So that's awesome to see. I think it's also worth pointing out Colton Herta put the thing on the line, made the Fast Nine, his first outing at Indianapolis in the 500. He's going to start fifth.
Yep.
That's incredible because he was saying in an interview with Racer that they had the thing as trimmed out as it could possibly be, which is incredible. We had Bourdais in the Fast Nine. Dale
My pick
Coyne,
to win. My
yeah.
pick to win.
Hey, that pick's looking a little better now.
Yeah, and he was pretty good in practice today. So it's
Yeah.
just it. But Rossi, I don't know if you got to watch practice today. He was just doing things that you better watch out for him. I would not be surprised if he leads 170 laps on Sunday.
Well, he's got to pass 8 cars first, and last year proved that track position was key. But yeah, he made some impressive moves on restarts last year. There was a restart or two where he would make passes on the outside in 1 and 2. Because I sat in 1 and 2 last year, and it's him and Wickens. They would make some incredible passes last year. Connor Daly starts 11th. Granted, it's an Andretti car, but when you look at his past outings at the 500 and the teams that he's ran for, Dale Coyne and I believe he ran for Schmidt Peterson one year in the 43 car, and also he's ran for Foyt. He's either crashed or DNQ'd or basically had a mechanical failure and retired almost every year that he's ran the 500.
Yeah,
So
and
this is important. This is an important year because it's a good opportunity for him to see what he can do, and I think this will open some doors up for him if he runs well this year.
I completely agree. I was actually happy to see Connor do as well as he did. He's a great talent, great on the engineering side, and he's just a great personality. So
Yeah.
it makes you question. He has the backing from the United States Air Force, which is great,
And the Speedway
and the Speedway itself through his
stepfather,
stepfather,
Doug Bowles, great guy. Great guy. I've met him a few times. Great guy.
But it's difficult to see, or it was difficult to see him in kind of not so good rides. But seeing him in an Andretti car this May, and just, I mean, on Fast Friday he pulled out a 231.7. Now that was with tow.
With tow, yeah, but he
With
still ran a
tow.
228 by himself.
Yeah, which still
Yeah.
is incredible to say the least. That's going to be a feel good story, I think.
One thing that I think you can say about him, and I heard a rumor that this could potentially lead to more races with Andretti even this year. Obviously pending funding. You got to remember a lot of his rides in IndyCar have been stand-in rides, substitute drives. Like remember when he stood in for Hinchcliffe when Hinchcliffe was injured. Stood in for him a couple times. He led at Detroit via strategy, of course, but he led at Detroit. I've seen him lead at Mid-Ohio before in a coin car. He's ran decent when he was in the car for Harding last year. Better than what Chavez was running at least.
Yes. Yeah.
You look at some of the, it's just kind of like it's not as big of a pressure situation because you're not normally there, so you're just kind of thrown in. It's like, hey, go see what you can do. But it's impressive to see with the lack of chemistry, lack of experience with each team that he's been with, and he's still been able to do reasonably well. So I think, if he's given a decent opportunity, you got to also remember his 2 full-time rides that he's had was Coyne in 2016, and that was before they brought in Bourdais and Craig Hampson, before they had their money, before Dale Coyne invested more, before they had more sponsorship dollars to deal with.
Yeah.
They were the bottom tier team of the series. And then of course he moves from them to Foyt, and just like a snap of the finger, the next year Foyt became the bottom tier team of the series. They had him and Munoz, and I don't think you can really necessarily blame them for that. Foyt has kind of had a problem the last couple years.
That's basically a circus in itself.
Yeah, ever since the Aero Kit era began.
Well, the issue is that you have one car being prepared in Texas and the other one in Indianapolis. Yes. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, and I've heard the story on that, and it makes sense, but it doesn't. It's just like, it
just doesn't.
They kind of they set their own fate on that one.
Yeah.
Another notable is Marcus Ericsson, a rookie in his first oval race, is going to start 13th in the 500. That's interesting to see, just to see how he handles traffic and how, we'll see. Does he make a rookie mistake? We've seen first lap crashes at the Speedway before. We'll have to see how he does. I was a little surprised, honestly, to see Elio qualify 12th. Usually he's in the Fast 9. I want to say this may be the first time, and obviously I don't know, I could go back and check. This may be the first time that he's not been in the Fast 9 at the 500. That was a surprise, honestly, because obviously being one of the favorites. James Davison driving for, I believe the entry is Foyt, Belardi, Jonathan Bird.
Yes.
They're going to start 15th.
15th, yeah.
That's impressive.
What I was more impressed by Scuderia Corsa, even though they had...
Oh, yeah.
Even though they had the Carpenter backing. 5th place? No, it wasn't 5th, was it?
4th.
4th.
They're starting inside row 2. That is very impressive.
Incredible.
With Ed Jones. And Ed Jones, remember, was let go from Ganassi at the end of last year. So, you got to be thinking this guy's got to be in a little bit of a slump, going from one of the best teams to being part-time with Ed Carpenter and Scuderia Corsa. But remember, he finished 3rd in the 500 his rookie season. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. We had Kimball qualify 20th in a Carlin car, and obviously the rest of the Carlin cars didn't make the field. It was pretty cool to see Kimball qualify 20th.
I agree. Now I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So, during the telecast of practices and such like that this week, now I heard this, Dreyer Reinbold Racing, Dennis Reinbold, said that if he could get the full-time funding, he would run full-time in the IndyCar series. Now, do you think a good showing, say, in the 500 this year could lead to that? And who would be their driver? Would it be JR or would it be Sage or someone else?
I think hands down it would be Sage Karam. Unless they had a pay driver come, approach them like, hey, I got the funding for the full season. But it's not very often that you see a driver with a full season of funding just come to a team. I don't say at that caliber because that seems like I'm slighting them. Just because they haven't been full-time since 2012, I believe. 2013 they ran part-time because they had funding issues then. 2012, I believe, is the last full season they ran, and then they even still had financial issues. So, it's not very often that I guess you could we'll call it a startup full-time team because they haven't done it in so long. A startup full-time team, usually you don't have a driver come to you with funding right off the bat. So I think Sage Karam has to be their guy because they could work off that. I mean, they've had sponsorship for him the last how many years at Indy? Obviously, one race versus 17 races is a big difference. But you look at the rally that they made. Sage wasn't very comfortable. Car was very imbalanced. They come back from a shaky qualifying session on Saturday, and they put the thing in the field on Sunday. And it wasn't like he just scraped by. He was the fastest out of those 6 guys. He's got a lot of talent. Sometimes he's had a hard time harnessing it. Sometimes he's been a problem on the track with other competitors and the things he said off the track about said competitors. But if we're talking about raw talent, I don't think he's really properly gotten his opportunity in IndyCar racing yet.
No, of course he was with Ganassi there, and then
that was a joke of a ride.
It was a joke of a ride, I will say.
Yeah,
that. Third and fourth cars at Ganassi were terrible, and then
yeah.
And then you had the Wilson crash, which, it wasn't his fault, but that really did a psychological number on him. And, he runs once a year. I'd love to see him again at other tracks or such like that, but I just don't think he is the same driver that he was, per se.
Right. I think that's a fair statement, yeah. Now, I think it's also worth pointing out, because this is incredible to me. All right, so the pole speed by Simon Pagenaud, 229.992, okay?
Yeah.
The 33rd and final qualifying position speed, 227.372. Basically 2.5 miles an hour separating this whole field.
Which is just...
That's insane. I don't care if it's a spec car. When you've got teams that run once a year, you got teams that this is their first 500, you got teams that are coming back from crashes. This is insane, okay? This is really unprecedented. And I think, it's... I would say it's a little expected for them to be closer together, because when you think of it having less downforce, less aero pieces, if you compare it to the aero kits.
Well, no, you would think it would be closer with the aero kits. That you would expect a larger gap, but no, this field
it's more expensive though.
It is more expensive, but the thing is that you have the old DW12s and the aero kits that came with them were so downforce heavy. You would expect everybody to be within, reason of one another, but with
I'll disagree with you there.
I will strongly disagree with that. But but yeah, I just expect it to be closer with more downforce, not less. But so I have another question for you.
All right.
So this year we had 36 entries attempt to make the 500. Now, based on trends and based on, what we've heard, next year we could have, maybe 38, 40 entries try to make the 500. Do you think that we're starting to get at a tipping point with only having 2 engine manufacturers? Maybe we need a third engine manufacturer.
I will say we need a third engine manufacturer, and it sounds like it's coming for the new engine formula in 2021. But I will even venture to say that we need a second chassis provider. And this is going to sound dumb. I know it's going to sound dumb because Dallar's done a pretty good job, but I think you really need a second chassis provider, because if you think the strain that is on the 2 engine providers that we have. Well, yeah, but okay, so think of this for a second, all right? Chevy and Honda. Yeah. All right, they're basically maxed out. If we're talking, the amount of engines they can pump out within a reasonable amount of time. All right, those are 2 manufacturers. Now, of course, that's with engines, not with chassis. But you've got Dallara, the sole provider of the series. All right, so all right, everybody that attempted to qualify had a chassis. 36 chassis right there.
Yeah.
Okay, some had a spare already prepared. Some used previous chassis. Say everybody has a spare, or at least a backup, even if it's a road car. That's 72 chassis, all right? Now, we're not going to assume that these were all built within the last 2 months or 3 months, whatever.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of chassis, though, okay? I think within the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to need to see another chassis provider in the IndyCar series.
Yeah, and I'm just looking back here as we're talking at some of the proposals that we had from Swift and.
I liked Lola's proposal back in the I think it was back in the IRO 5 days. Mm-hmm. Lola had a proposal, and Panos with their DPO1 chassis, actually they had a speedway concept for that.
Yes.
And that was rejected just because they wanted to cut costs and keep it to one car. I think that was kind of a fatal mistake, but it is what it is. But
And we got to think that Dallara, they're not only providing chassis for IndyCar, they're providing it for Super Formula, Formula 2, Formula 3, probably Asian Formula 3, Asian Formula 2, European. I mean, there's just so many series that rely on Dallara for chassis work that it's unreal. And
Right.
the thing is that they're not a big company. They're a small outfit, I think, of 150 people.
now I think I would say it's slim pickings if we're talking chassis, because if we're comparing it to like the 80s and 90s, because this is back when 80s and 90s were, some teams still had their own chassis. Like I think Team Menard, I think they not only had their own engines, but they also had their own chassis.
Yeah.
Penske had their own chassis. The All-American Racers, which was Dan
Eagle.
Gurney's team, they had the Eagle. There was the Swift chassis. There was the Lola. There was the Reynard.
G-Force.
The G-Force was in the IRL,
Okay, yeah, but
which was the 2000s. And then, of course, Reynard went bankrupt in the early 2000s, which is why we saw the Reynards become very uncompetitive in Champ Car, because there was no development from them, no further development, so the Lolas took over. But yeah, I think if the opportunity comes about to have another chassis in IndyCar that is comparable to the Dallara, similar in design but reasonably competitive, I think should go for it easily.
yeah, and we've had talks that there have been even OEMs that have come in and said, yeah, we'd love to join the IndyCar series, but we want to develop our own chassis. I believe Lamborghini has been one of those. I know there's another. Forgive me, I don't know. I can't remember the exact other one, but I know Lamborghini was in talks with IndyCar to join the IndyCar series, but they wanted to build their own chassis, and they just said no.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I don't make some of the decisions, because it sounds pretty rough.
Exactly.
So I want to finish the podcast off on predictions, because I know we already predicted the 500 earlier this month, but I think we need to kind of retract some of that, because obviously a lot's changed. So it's the Super Weekend this weekend. Monaco,
Yes.
Indy 500, Coke 600.
Mhm.
All right, John, who do you got
For all
winning all three? All three.
Oh, okay.
You sticking with Bourdais?
I'm going to stick with Bourdais for the 500.
Okay.
I honestly think that when it comes to strategy, when it comes to, overall just beating the guys on pure strategy, Dale Coyne has it down. There's no question about it. A team with a third of the budget most years were contending for wins. That's the reason why. They work a lot harder to get what they get. So I'm going
And
with
smarter.
Bourdais. And yeah, they do work a lot smarter too.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely Bourdais for the 500. As for the Monaco Grand Prix, I shouldn't say this, or I think I'm going to say it. I'm going to go with it, but Max Verstappen is going
Really?
to win his first Monaco Grand Prix. Yes, I think he will break up the Mercedes 1-2 circle jerk at the front of the grid.
Jeez.
And I think
That's
that,
a morbid way of putting it.
I mean, honestly,
You're right, though. It's really
the
bad.
quote pinnacle of motorsports. Yet, oh man, the same teams won every single race this season and
Yeah,
finished 1-2.
it's a joke. It's a joke.
it's
We've
a
talked about it already. It's terrible.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. It's awful, really
Yeah.
awful. So there's that. I'm not going to name the podium. Max Verstappen, all the way through and through. Now, Coke 600 is going to be a little tougher, but
That's gonna be more wide open, I think.
it's a little more wide open. Just not really sure. I think it's going to be a Chevrolet driver. I can say that. I'm pretty sure Chevrolet, is on the right track.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm going to say it. Alex Bowman. He's finally going to stop finishing second and win the Coke 600, his first race.
Man, I'm gonna like I sometimes I don't like doing this, but actually I'm gonna agree with you on two of your picks.
Oh yeah.
'Cause I was thinking the same thing. Red Bull has run really good on street races because it's downforce dependent. Monaco's downforce dependent. They run with Danny Rick before. I think Verstappen's due for one.
Yep.
Mercedes isn't going to win again, hopefully. So, yeah, I got Max Verstappen. I'm with you with Bowman. Bowman winning the Coke 600, not only would it be super cool because he's a likable guy, he's due for a win. Hendrick's due for another win. The 88 car hasn't won since Phoenix of 2015 in the fall. So they're due for one, big time. Greg Ives, I'm surprised he hasn't been put on the chopping block. But, yeah, they're due for one. So that would be cool to see. And the Indy 500, at the beginning of the month, I said Newgarden.
Yeah.
I think that's still a favorable pick, but I don't think that's who it's going to be.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's still going to be Clean Air's king.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is on such a wave of momentum. From looking like the guy that was going to be the odd man out at Penske to winning the GP to winning the pole, has never won the 500. How big would it be for Simon Pagenaud to win not only for himself and for Penske, but to win with Menards? Menards has such a history at the 500, and they've never won the 500. So it'd be cool to see that happen. So I'm going to pick Pagenaud, but dark horse. I'm going to go with a dark horse here. Colton Herta. I think he's easily going to be the rookie of the race if he doesn't crash out. He's somebody to look out for because he hasn't seemed phased by anything. He hasn't even hit double digits on races started yet, and he already has a victory. He won at COTA. All right. He didn't seem very phased with having to compete against Fernando Alonso. When they asked him, hey, what do you think about Alonso being here? You think, does it intimidate you? Is it kind of cool to be racing with a hero of yours? And he said, nah, he's in my playground. It's my job to beat him, basically, is what he said. So, this kid just does not seem like he cracks under pressure very often. So, I think he's going to be one to watch out for.
Oh, absolutely. Now, as for some other favorites, I think Rossi.
Rossi, easily.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm not sure if I said it
off the air.
I said it off the air, but if he gets out front, he's going to lead 170 laps. That's how good the car looked in practice. Now, of course, it was cooler, but still, he was making moves that no one was even touching.
Right. And he did it last year on restart. Yeah.
Marco, I can see him breaking the curse, 50th anniversary, running his grandfather's paint scheme.
That would be so cool.
To
see that scheme win again. Person, because I'll be there. But
that would be amazing. Connor Daly, we've talked about him. Being that dark horse, he's finally in a good ride. I could see him contending. I will say this year's field is probably one of the toughest fields to pick for.
Yeah, we're talking major bragging rights. Winning the 500 is huge anyways, but this has to be one of the most competitive fields in years. So to win this race would be a lot bigger than, past races, I would say.
Yeah, and I'll be completely honest with you. I think there's 25 cars that can win the race. And there's not many years where 5 cars could win the race, but I see 25 cars that could win it.
Well, think about it this way. If not for having to pit for fuel late in the race, Steph Wilson could have won.
Jack Harvey could have won.
Oriol Servia could have won. So, never know. Never know what strategy could offer. It's going to be so exciting, man. I'm so pumped to go and watch. We go every year, and it's going to be exciting. So, that being said, we had a lot to talk about. And
yes.
We're definitely going to have a lot to talk about next Tuesday here on the podcast because we're going to recap every race from this upcoming weekend. John, it's been a pleasure. Where can we find you on social media?
So you can find me at JSPool3 on Twitter. I believe it's JSPool3 _56 or something along those lines on Instagram. And also check out my YouTube and Twitch pages. They're kind of, ghost town as of late, but JP3 Gaming and JP3 Gaming 56 on Twitch.
Make sure you guys follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ZBuchanan4. Like my karting page on Facebook at Zach Buchanan Racing. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've been very active as of lately, uploading race vlogs. So it's been a lot of fun doing that. Make sure you guys follow the podcast on Twitter at The Pit Limiter. Make sure you guys check us out on all major podcast platforms if you haven't already. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any major podcast platform you can think of, we're there. We also stream live on Facebook and YouTube at The Pit Limiter Podcast for both of those. So make sure you guys go check us out. It's been great, and we'll have a lot to recap for you next week here on the Pit Limiter Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, everybody.